Like I said before the break, that we're going to get back and discuss the Uganda's worrying state of the public debt, the national debt. I believe it is very important for us to get into such topics, more so when we are reviewing the next financial year budget. As we're starting up the show, we had a report regarding Parliament approving the 48 trillion shillings budget last week on Friday. And as we are actually moving into the same context, I would prefer we get to discuss it even more bigger at this particular moment in time. Well, I'm joined by a guest this morning coming in from the Uganda'S network, and I pretty much guess it is from the rightful sector or from the rightful people to discuss this same issue to do with Uganda's public debt. Many thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much, and good morning, viewers.
Okay. Your names, please?
My name is Christine Birinchiro, and I work with Uganda'S network.
Okay.
Yes, as a programs manager and as a policy analysis and governance program.
Uganda'S network.
Yes.
The debt. I've only got to understand the debt. What does the Uganda'S network do for the viewer out there to understand why we even have to get into this discussion?
Yes, thank you. Uganda'S network was formed in 1996 to lobby for debt relief for the country because our debt levels had soared. And so alongside the IMF, the World Bank, we went for the HIPIC, Highly Indebted Poor Countries Initiative, and later the MDRI. And indeed, Uganda was forgiven the debt that we had. And so we had a clean slate.
In the context that we did not have to pay back.
Yes, yes. In the context that we did not have to pay back. But the conditionality that was attached to that forgiveness was that instead of getting the resources that you were supposed to pay back, get them and put them in a basket and address the poverty situation in your country because it was bad. So having achieved that, we then decided to monitor the utilization of these monies that had been put into the basket to monitor, to improve on the state of education, of health, and agriculture and other, poverty eradication. Okay. Yes.
All right. Now let's get into our discussion this morning. I would want to know, how does this ever-increasing public debt affect our economy? We're in a state whereby I do believe everyone is worried about the level or the cost of living that we're actually encountering lately. But how does this affect our economy?
First of all, it is true that our public debt is actually hitting worrying levels. Just as a sample, from 49 trillion as of December 2019, that was immediately before COVID, and right now, as of April 2022, we are at 74 trillion. So that is quite worrying. And so what is the effect of such debt? One, we see it affecting our national resources. For instance, the budget, you will have a bigger chunk going to debt servicing. And so what will remain to address the other sectors or the other programs? You have human capital development, which has, of course, health. We have education in there. Those are key areas which focus on the human resource. And so we see that we are cheating our human resource if we have to continue paying hefty sums in debt. It is going to be at the expense of some of these key development areas. And so we see as the debt grows, and so does the need to cut on the national budget. And we also know that Uganda Revenue Authority tells us that while they had projected to raise about 22 trillion for this current financial year, 21-22, they only have so far generated 17 trillion. And so we are remaining with only June to end the financial year. So it usually gets harder to meet your revenue targets. But we also know that payment of debt takes first call on your domestic revenues. So if you have to generate the 22 trillion, you have to first pay off the debt. We are now projecting to raise 25 trillion, even when we haven't realized the 22 yet. And yet, we all know that the economy is not that well, at least for now. So it remains to be seen if we'll actually raise all that.
Well, and also for the Uganda Revenue Authority to actually hit the target, just like Madam Christine has been highlighting, is that a few weeks back, the Uganda Revenue Authority got into a dialogue with one of the key major taxpayers, trying to understand why is there less taxes being remitted. And they wanted to know, is it because they are evading the taxes? Is it because of the state of the economy that has led to a less revenue collection? Big questions. But when you look at the situation here, is it a state for us to worry in terms of, let's say, is there a limit to the national debt? That if we are to reach this state, we are gone.
Well, we have quite a number of laws and policies that spell out, you know, the safety nets or the safety levels beyond which you should not go. The public debt management framework, for example, it gives us the 50% threshold debt to GDP. But we see that we have exceeded that. We are, I think, now getting to we are at 52, according to Parliament, and so that is quite worrying. But even then, the Auditor General's report, I think of 2020, came out and said that Uganda had now started reaching, our debts. With regard to our debt, we were getting into the questionable, you know, areas, because Fitch, which is one of the global credit ranking entities, put us in moderate as opposed to low. We were at low debt default, and now we're at moderate, and that means the likelihood of us defaulting on our debt obligations is coming to reality.
Okay.
And so what does that mean? That means that if Uganda now has to go and borrow still externally, then you're going to attract higher interest rates.
Okay.
The loans you get from now will be a bit more expensive, because now your ability to pay back is becoming questionable. And who wants to give you money and you default? So they'll attach a bit more stringent conditions to make sure that they can recover in case they give you their money.
Someone would also want to know, how did we reach here? Because we're looking at the situation where our debt is actually heading to a worrying level. We've seen the signs, or what a person would say, we've seen the red flags, and nothing has changed yet. But how did we reach this state? If you're to break down for a viewer to know what leads a country to such a state in their economy.
Yes, thank you. One, the of course, corruption, which is really huge, the biggest contributor, but also the path we have decided to take. I think since the 2016s there, because we look at about 2016 to 2020, our concessional borrowing was about 74%, and that is borrowing from well, these traditional lenders, you would say the World Bank, the IMF, and so currently we have moved away from that, and now we are at about 60% from 74%, and we are preferring the non-concessional way, the commercial way, or the China way, if you will, from about 11% still in 2016 to now about 19% or more. And so you see that the trajectory we are taking with regard to our borrowing is a bit more dangerous, because the commercial loans do not have much of a grant element, just like the concessional do. And then the repayment periods are usually shorter. and then you're getting a bit more bigger chunks of money as compared to the concessional loans. And so because of that, we see that the debt has, accumulated so fast, and yet we have not utilized it the way we are supposed to utilize it. There are those loopholes and leakages, and so that is why we see, according to the Inspector General of Government, that was, I think, last year, Madame Betty Kamya, she said we lose about 9 trillion every year to corruption. So if we borrow this money and we do not put it to the right use, we are not able to generate the returns to enable us to pay back these debts.
Okay.
That is why we see ourselves squeezing now the taxpayer, borrowing here and there to be able to pay back this debt, because debt is debt. Okay. You must pay it back. Yeah.
Okay, now let's also get into the way forward before we actually talk more inflation in the country. What can we do to survive such situations? I do believe it's now, we already eaten up, but then we can still change something. What can we do to at least see that it doesn't exceed?
Yeah, thank you. One is tame our appetite for borrowing.
Okay.
Yes, we must borrow only when we need to.
Okay.
And
so borrowing is okay?
Yeah, borrowing is okay. We always say at Uganda Debt Network, we are for borrowing, but responsible borrowing. Yes.
Borrowing to make good use of.
Yes,
okay.
If you're borrowing to invest and then generate returns,
better. That
one is okay.
Okay.
And in fact, the Public Debt Management Framework actually says borrowing should be for those projects which have a high economic return. That is when you can go for, specifically for the non-concessional loans, which is the commercial. And indeed, we saw government had come up, I think last year during the budget reading, and the minister had said they are going to move away from the commercial borrowing and get back to concessional borrowing. We are hopeful, and we stand to see if that is actually going to happen. But for us to also escape this trap is that we have to make sure that we deal with the corruption, where we are losing so much money and yet not generating any. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Let's to actually see something to do with our continuous inflation, with the ongoing inflation in the country. Where do you see us heading? I want to believe almost all the Ugandans here. I, for one, I'm worried about the state of living that we're in currently. But according to the current situation here, is there a way forward? Because the next financial year is looking at recovery. Yes. Where are our chances for recovery?
Thank you. I remember the president came up last night during his talk, and he was encouraging us to, to do boo-boo. He was encouraging boo-boo. Buy Uganda, build Uganda. And so he also told us that this crisis, of course it is all driven by the fuel crisis, is external to us. He quoted the war between Ukraine and Russia. And some of these things we have no control over. But one thing we can do to guard ourselves from such shocks, one, we have to first of all discourage imports, yeah? Because the raw materials are expensive that you're importing, so only go for imports if it is inevitable. But again, we want to encourage the Ugandans to use whatever you have within, use the raw materials that are within in as much as possible. And indeed, the Minister for Finance has said that in this budget, the next financial year budget, 22-23, there's going to be about 200 billion shillings for the small businesses recovery as a fund, and that one is encouraged because we need to see them encouraged and boosted to survive. But again, it has to be from within, domestically. We also see, other support. Microfinance Center is going to be also capitalized. The Uganda Development Bank, UDB, is going to be capitalized. So those are some of the good, like areas I would see in the budget as pro people, if I could. But again, a question comes up, or worries or concerns on the accessibility, because we've previously seen some of these funds and some of these, measures come up, but then there are issues regarding accessibility of such funds. So we want this to be as transparent as possible. We want it to go to the actual beneficiaries if we are to see the economy revamped. Yes.
Okay, and this is off script though, but just recently in Zimbabwe, the government revealed a statement that stopped foreign, rather banking institutions from lending for a period of time. Do you see this helping our issue to do with public debt? Just in case, because you've actually come out and said that borrowing is very fine.
Yes.
And so people going out there to actually apply for loans, you shouldn't worry anyone, even the government should. But do you see it as a possibility of at least controlling the public debt in a country like ours?
No, I don't see that as a possibility. One, I feel we really need discipline. Holding back the capital or the funds that should be used instead to invest wouldn't be a solution. Yeah?
Okay.
Yes, I don't think that would be a wise decision for us as Ugandans, because we need to invest.
Okay.
Whether it is government, whether it is private sector, we need to see them and be able to invest. Though, of course, for government, borrowing domestically is what we would try as much as possible. Want to see government reduce this.
Okay.
Yeah, we want to see government.
I wanted to also hear your view as the Uganda Debt Network this time around.
Yes.
We've been through such crises before. I believe public debt is always there and all that. So what has been the possible ways that you believe are the solutions to such scenarios? And you know very well that they are very effective.
Well, one, reduce spending.
Okay.
There's spending that is really necessary, but then there's spending that is, is not really necessary.
Oh.
Yeah. If we can reduce the size of government, for example, you have a whole, I think over 500 members of parliament, and their wage bill. You have, I don't know, over 80 cabinet ministers.
Public servants everywhere.
You have, I don't know how many districts we have right now, the administrative units.
Okay.
So, and then of course you have those issues with regard to corruption, funds leakages. Especially in the procurement sector, yeah. So we have all this, and we have the ability to stop this. Just empower the institutions to do their work really, and we tighten the knots on the corrupt. If we do that, remember I remember one of the things I cannot forget is the previous Inspector General of Government on her lordship now, Irene Muliagonja, saying that the big fish always hide behind the president's name, and then when the current IGG comes in and is emphatic on lifestyle audits, again the president tells her to go slow on the corrupt, because at least they invest the proceeds of corruption domestically. But we want to see if we tighten the noose on corruption. I believe we can secure some resources, but also we've seen the Auditor General's reports again over time, noting quite a huge sum of money that we lose in bad loans. Yeah. Yeah, there are those non-performing, there are the non-performing loans, the loans which we acquire when we are not yet ready, and so the money has to sit there, maybe because the government counterpart funding is not ready. And so you see the money stretch, and yet for these loans, you're paying premiums. They are quite expensive. You keep paying interest, you keep servicing these loans. And so we see a lot of money lost in such areas. And And so if we were to be, if we were to come out and be serious and, I believe that we could get back to the path.
Okay.
To recovery.
Let's mention something here before we go in for the commercials to do with the parish development model. This was designed to actually see people receiving money through their parishes, but under circles. It's more of actually going in for a loan and lending. With the parish development model, it's completely may not concern the public debt that we currently have, but currently, with the parish development model, I do believe it's one of those government initiatives that still when the government is going to borrow this money to put into this particular parish development model. Do you believe it is that particular program that can at least impact people's lives, or can it actually represent a good loan?
No, I don't know what to comment, but with parish development model, we've had PAF, Poverty Action Fund, I think 97, 98. We've had Entandikwa, we've had Bonaba Gaugawale, we've had Operation Wealth Creation, which maybe is all. We've had NADS, we've had Emyoga most recently.
NADS were effective.
And now, and now we have Parish Development Model. What these programs had in common was improving household incomes. But I'm yet to see a comprehensive review of any or all of these programs. But what I know is that they were not so successful, and we continue doing the same thing. I wish I could say, I don't want to say on the onset and be pessimistic. I want to see how PDM is going to be different, but if we have not addressed the challenges that we have encountered through these other programs, before, I don't see how we are going to succeed at this one.
Oh, okay. All right. And after the break, Kristen is going to return, and we are going to be discussing one. The state of the economy in regards to the national budget that is actually going to be presented. The Permanent Secretary to the Treasury did call it a pro-people budget. Is it so? Those are some of the discussions we're going to have after the break. And we want to understand how true this is. We're also going to get to understand, still with the national budget, we are ready for this 48 trillion budget amidst the crisis that we're in. And then if we can, is there a possibility of raising a bigger percentage of taxes? So our next discussion after the break, next quick 15, I call them the next quick 15, we'll be discussing the national budget and reviewing it ahead of the preparations for June 14th. Stick around, as a big discussion has been public debt, and we are still on it. We will be looking at the way forward. We've been looking at the way forward, how we reached here, how we can survive this situation. But then after the break, we are discussing the national budget. It's a pro-people budget. Is it just a statement, or there is something deep into it? Stick around. Good morning.